name is Daisy Nam. I'm the assistant director here at the Carpenter Center. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the Carpenter Center bookshop. If you've never been, I see a lot of new faces. We have a lot of exhibitions and programs, so if you're interested, there's a sign-up sheet in the back, and we'll also sell the book here in the back as well. I just wanted to thank, where is Christina Davis and on the floor and Mary Graham at the Woodbury Poetry Room for being our collaborators for this evening. And so I will introduce her and she will introduce our guest of honor. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Sorry, don't worry. Thank you, Daisy and Dan. It seems right at a time when so much doesn't, to inaugurate a new series of collaborations between the Poetry Room and the Carpenter Center with this event, which will focus on, among other things, collaborative creation, collective action, and to use Layli Long Soldier's own phrase, quote, present company. Present company, and feel free for the present company to do whatever it needs to do. Maybe over there, but bear in mind there's a screen there. Present company as distinct from present companies and corporations. Present company as distinct from past attempts at togetherness and historically enforced aggregates. And present company as distinct from virtual company. Rather, her work, of which tonight is an extension, focuses on those who physically stand and come together, as, for example, at Standing Rock, or as in the case of a poetry reading, those who sit together, or stand together, as it turns out, albeit in unease, and situate themselves to receive. It is such a rare privilege to be in the presence and present company of a person and a poet whose work is so self-evidently arduous, tracing the arduous and plural paths of apology within her own family, as well as the through lines of failed or postponed or uncompleted speech acts and, quote, centuries of sorry between her two nations. A poet who is sensitized and embodied and uniquely earnest and painstaking, as in plural pains being taken, in questioning and revealing to us her own and our part, a word that is particularly important to her, part, our own part in what James Baldwin has called, quote, the unanswerable present. And helping us to be aware. The word whereas, of course, has awareness and beware in it. Being aware of our adherence to not only overtly imposed laws, but to other subtler governances and gravities that prevent us and our flourishing. Because in the end, which is the present moment, this book is about and toward future flourishing. Whether those laws I mentioned are brought upon us by .govs or .edus, whether it is our minds that are preoccupied by self-imposed sentences or constraints, or native lands that are actually occupied or about to be irrevocably drilled upon, or whether it is the freedom of the page that has been interrupted and excessively boundaried by said or implied ideas of what grammar is, what a poem is, whether the word poem and apology have the same plosive in it lately. Whether in its apology or relentless defense of itself, poetry has reified around certain formations and modes, sacrificing its particular powers, one of which, quite unlike the seeming certitude of legalese, the order of which hides disorder, is its, being poetry, this is a long sentence, its capacity to dwell in uncertainty, whether what I've just said is a sentence. Long Soldier, and this is almost over. Long Soldier makes clear, actually that's a line, it's over now from her work in such a different context. Long Soldier makes clear, as Baldwin demanded in his own Notes from an Occupied Territory, that, quote, it the government, and it, the documents that communicate what is meant and intended by that government, cannot be allowed to be answerable only to itself. I'll repeat that line by Baldwin. It cannot be allowed to be answerable only to itself. Answerability, responsibility, quote, where we respond, not elsewhere, but here, now, in this room, on this land, throughout this quote-unquote country, a word which Long Soldier's work reminds us comes from the same root, or rather I'll remind you, as encounter and as whereas, which means on the contrary, country, encounter, contrary. Please welcome Layli Long Soldier, who will read from Whereas and new work and talk about collaboration.
Hi, good evening. I often like to stand just so you can see me, but I hope you can see me. Is that okay? Yes. If you can see me, we'll be okay, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh man, I don't know. Well, look at the screen. Well, so, Layli kichita hanska e machiapi da ya hipina chante washte na be chiuzapi. I'm very, very, very honored to be here. So thank you, Christina and Daisy. Somewhere. Oh, hello. And Woodbury. And it's really wonderful to be here. Okay, so tonight is going to be actually a little different than I've ever done. So we wanted to make tonight's presentation different than what I did last night. So last night I had kind of a straightforward reading and then like a Q&A afterwards. And so we didn't want to just repeat the same thing. So for tonight, what I decided I would do is we talked about I could come and talk to you about what I'm doing now. And so this is going to be a kind of a lecture / presentation / reading, but it's going to be all new stuff. So it is in process. Some of the poems I may share are not perfect and polished, but my favorite thing actually to talk about is process, because it keeps me grounded. And it keeps me, that's the place where I think most of us as writers or artists feel alive, when you're talking about how you're working or what you're working on and the method and the approach and all of that. So that is actually what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to discuss. So I am working on right now, I got so much pressure from everyone to like already start working on a second book. I know, my God, I was like, man, it just came out. But so people are like that out there, just so you know. So I felt pressure. I was listening to people, and over the last year, I had maybe one or two ideas that I sort of was settling on in a serious way. And I thought, okay, I had thought about the idea of duality, and I started tinkering with that idea. And but I started working on some pieces, and it just didn't feel right, or it didn't click. And one day I was sitting and I realized that actually I already kind of had a body of work already if I were to kind of pull it together. It will take some time. probably another year or two. But I realized that for the last few years, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years, I have been working collaboratively. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm working on now is pulling together some pieces that I consider collaborative pieces. And I'm going to talk about maybe some of the different ways that I do collaborate. And it's not always just one-on-one, me and one other poet or what have you. So I'm going to go back to one of my first collaborations. And this was when I was actually first working on this, my response to the national apology. I hope you can see way back there. Oh, okay. Anyway. Okay. When I started writing my own response to the national apology, somewhere in the middle of that, talking with some friends, I actually started to become curious what my own community might have to say in response to that apology, the national apology. So we got the idea of maybe taking some of that text and projecting it onto some walls and having the community come in and respond to that governmental text. So I got the idea and I messaged my friend Mary, and Mary appears a lot in here. So actually you're going to hear a lot about her. She's one of my main collaborators. There's something about, sometimes chemistry, someone just, for some reason, they make you work, or it just, they push you in a good way. So she's one of those people that gets me working. So anyway, I messaged Mary, and at the time she was working at the Heritage Center at Red Cloud Indian School on Pine Ridge. She was the curator at the time. And so I proposed this idea of projecting text, and this was back in 2012. And I proposed this, and then she just got all excited and said, yeah, we can do it. And within actually, I think a month or two, we got it up. And back then, I didn't have 2 pennies to scrape together, but we did it. I bought a whole cart of art supplies, pastels, markers, graphite, what have you. And I put it in front of that column, and we projected the text onto the walls, and we invited our community, Lakota community, to come in and interact with that text. And right now you see mostly young people I think they're probably from Red Cloud, from the school, coming in and starting to write. That's when it was just up maybe a day or two, and coming in to interact. The young man on the far right, I have the most beautiful story. This guy sat staring at the wall, literally just standing there for I want to say 15, 20 minutes. And we were like, my goodness, what, he was in deep thought somewhere. And I wish I have a picture. I don't think I included a picture of what he ended up doing. But finally, it's you saw the light bulb go on. And it's it came to him. And he went to work, and there he is working. And in the end, what he did was he drew a picture of a piece of paper ripped in half. And it's drawn in red, and he wrote blood-stained apology on that. It was sort of a response to this national apology. Okay, here's some more students interacting. Lakota young people. Here's a few comments. What makes this an apology? And so on. We have a young person highlighting some of the words: violence, mistreatment, The sections that we chose, like the far back wall of, it was on 3 different walls. The far back one was the section on boarding schools, which was important because Red Cloud was one of the oldest boarding schools on our reservation. So that was a part of that. And it apologizes for that. We'll see why. This is an interesting question that reappears in a number of my collaborations. You'll see that tonight as well. So it's something I'm thinking about. But in this particular installation, we saw that all over the walls. Why? Our community asking why. Again, some more young people. This was towards the beginning. I had to include that. That's my sister Arnie and my grandma Sha. So she just passed away last year. She was the oldest member of Potato Creek, our community, for quite a while. But anyway, Arnie brought grandma to the installation. So that was pretty nice. Okay, this is moving towards the end. Okay, so it was up for, I think it was up for 3 months. And towards the end, you'll see, hopefully you can tell, the walls were packed. And by the end of the installation, people were using ladders to write at the top, very top of the walls. We see here on the front column, we even had visitors, Palestinian visitors, who came and contributed. We had people from everywhere come. So this one, oh man, I wish I could, I thought I had reduced the size. This was one of the most moving, it's something that I think about all the time, and I want to do something with it, but I'm not quite sure what. But it's something that just sort of seeded itself within me, and I don't know who contributed it. It was by the time I saw it on the wall, the visitor had already gone. But this person is talking about, prenatal memory. So about their grandpa being in the womb when their mother, the great grandma, was told to run and run until you hear nothing. This is for Wounded Knee Massacre. So it happened in 1890, and Grandpa was born in the spring of 1891. Really, so many of these stories are not that far away from us. They are stories that our families, our people still carry. They're still very close to us. So to give you some perspective, I was thinking about this the other day. My grandma that I just showed you in that picture, she was actually a great grandmother by the time she passed away. Can you imagine? That's a lot, right? And that's within one lifetime. It's not that far away from us. So this history is not really history. It's still within us. Here you see how full the walls became. They were packed. At the end, we invited our young people and the community to come back and paint the walls white. And so that was a gesture to kind of mirror the apology, which ends with those disclaimers and a kind of erasure of that apology. So they're starting to paint the wall. We have, there's again some young people, probably from Red Cloud, girls reading the walls, and I think they were helping to paint as well. Okay, last but not least, at the closing of that installation, we took that text. Oh, so Red Cloud is Catholic school, and I really don't think, I mean, they were so welcoming to us, but I really don't think they knew like what we were doing, like the full impact of what we were doing with that installation. So on the last night of that installation, me and Mary, we, just as a kind of gesture, we went outside, and this brick building is the nunnery, or the convent, where the nuns sleep, and we projected that text from the apology about boarding schools onto the outside wall. That's me. Same hair, right? Come on, switch it up. No, I like it. Okay. So that was from this book. That was part of the energy. Now, not much of that text made it into, what was on the wall. It didn't make it really into this book. But I want to say that the energy of it and the community and the response, all of it, made its way into this work. Okay, I'm going to move on to another collaboration of sorts. And this was from last year. And I had an installation called A Line Through Grief. And I think this was in Canada, Toronto. I want to say Toronto. So what I did is I had I made 3 boxes out of balsa wood. And in front of each box, I had 3 natural elements. One was a monarch butterfly. The middle one is there's 10 little feathers there, and the last one is a stone. Oh man, like I reduced that. Anyway, okay, so you can't see the whole thing, but I wrote a poem. Okay, so I had a poem and I had 3 boxes. See, I reduced these for you guys. I'm so sorry. Okay, pretend you can see the whole thing. I had 3 boxes. I had a poem. And I had some water. A jug of water. Okay. There we go. So we get to the gallery, and we installed the poem in vinyl lettering on the right. And then we installed the boxes. And then, I had the butterfly feathers and the stone. And above each box, I had instructions for visitors to the gallery. So right here, over the first one, I asked visitors to place, of course, this was voluntary, they didn't have to, but to place inside the names of people, places, or parts of themselves that they have lost and they are grieving. So in that box was a lot of names of places or people, and also parts of themselves. In the middle box over that, and we had it in English and French, in the middle box, I asked them to place questions that they have as they're grieving. So the middle box was all questions. And the last box, I asked them to place ways of dealing with grief. So whatever it might be, listen to music or travel or what have you. So we had those 3 boxes up. This installation was up for 3 months. And by the way, the poem I have on the wall is also in 3 sections. The first one says Gramasha. You saw Grandma, so this was right after she passed away. And we were kind of really sad about that. So that was the first box, the first section. The second one, I have all questions. Those are questions that I actually was asking her. I was asking her love advice. So, and the third section is a dream I had one night. And I think that it came as a result of those questions and talking to her. So you see, this is one of the little signs. Please submit questions you may have as you grieve and experience loss. And I can't read French, but I wrote it. Okay, so then it was up for 3 months. I wish you could see the whole picture. I don't know why these became reduced, but anyway, the gallery sent back the contents of those boxes after 3 months. And this is the questions box. And my table is really big, so this went the length of that whole table, these little pieces of paper. So I spread them all out, and I just sat with all of these voices, all of these beautiful questions that people had as they were grieving. So you'll see, here's some questions. What happens next? What is my identity? Did I lose her or did she lose me? And then if you read French, you can maybe understand that. What was really beautiful and interesting was, so I laid them all out, and then I started organizing them, kind of by theme or similarity. What I found is there were a lot of questions that were very similar to each other, with maybe just 1 or 2 words there that were different. And that was really interesting and beautiful to me, to know how similar we are to each other, even in French or English. It doesn't even matter the language. In this process of grief, so many of us have the same thoughts and the same questions. So, for example, I had a whole stack about time, like maybe 15, 20 questions. How long will this last? How long will I feel like this? Will I feel like this forever? When will this ache end? And so on. So it's basically the same thing, but just kind of different iterations. Oops. Okay. Would you like me to maybe share some of the pieces that have come? Okay, let's look at that. But now, so when I teach, my students hate when I have to use the computer, because I'm not going to read the piece about Gramasha. It's really rough. I'm not sure I like that. But I'm going to read some of the questions I would like you to see. No, this. Okay. Let's do 200. Okay. So part of what I'm doing now is taking those questions and working on the orchestration of them. And some of the questions that are similar, I'm putting together, and then maybe I also put a few that are a little different to kind of shake things up. But I started off, this first page is pain a necessary step of life? What is my identity? Will I come back to me? I miss feeling loved. I hope it's for the best. This is a piece I started writing in response to some of the questions, which I don't like, so I'm not going to read it. Okay, here's some more. I love this. Will the pain ever go away? Will I ever recover? How long will this last? When does the dull pain in your chest leave? How long will it hurt? And what will I be like when I hopefully heal? How long will I feel like this? How long will I be this way? How will I know when I have finished grieving you or this place? Does it ever really end? When will grieving end? When will the grieving end? How can I cross time? Was I made for love? Where are you? Then I love this. I had a whole stack. I haven't even typed them all out. I have like 20 whys. So I told you this is a recurring thing I see in so many of my collaborations is why. So this is why, pourquoi. And I don't know why that's funny too. Anyway. I had a whole bunch of pourquoi, a whole bunch of why. And really the only difference might be in the punctuation. So you see some with, and I made the punctuation exactly as it was on the paper. One question mark, exclamation, and so on. And then the last one, why me, which was in there. Okay. I'm going to go back to here. Okay. And then I go slideshow. Is that what I do? Slideshow. There we go. Okay. Moving on. I'm going to move on to something a little later in the year. This was last year as well. This actually took a long time. I worked on a show, an exhibit with two other Lakota women, artists, Mary and Clementine Bordeaux. Mary, again, one of my main collaborators. And we did a show, an exhibit on the phrase Midakoye Oyasin. So I don't know, have any of you guys heard that phrase by any chance? Okay, so it is actually something, none of you have heard of it, but it is a phrase that is often used and borrowed and sometimes appropriated, is that the word, by other people. In our language, this roughly generally translates to we are all related or all my relatives. So the reason we were interested in exploring this phrase in our language is because it's something that is sometimes used by others to create kind of a sense of familiarity, like, oh, we're all related, and people really feel like that's a way of opening a door, creating familiarity. But I don't think they always understand the fuller meaning and context of what it means to be a relative, and the responsibility and the obligations that come in saying you're my cousin. For someone to say I'm your auntie, that is something serious, right? To say you're an auntie is like, that's a lot of responsibility. So being related and understanding yourself as a relative, that's kind of what we wanted to explore in our community. We ourselves did not have all the answers. So what we did was, Clementine was trained as a documentary film artist, And so she went in our community and she interviewed like 6 or 7 women in our community, speakers and people who knew kind of the fuller context of how that phrase is used and where it comes from, and the larger idea of the Lakota under philosophy about relationship and being related. So what I did was I listened to hours and hours of interviews that Clementine did, community interviews, and I wrote poems based on those interviews, listening and to the phrases, the language that they were using. I made these poems, and then I took them, and I had a star. Do you guys know what star quilts are? Okay, so they're quilts. You'll especially see them in the plains area with Lakota people. There's something that we give each other on special occasions, and people make really, really beautiful star quilts. So my cousin Arnie, that you saw in the picture with Grandma, okay, Arnie gave me a pattern for a star quilt one time, and I was like, oh, thank you. But in my head, I was like, I don't sew, so what am I gonna do with this? But I loved it, right? I loved it. I still loved it anyway. I loved so I had that pattern and sitting in my house, and it was just like kind of speaking to me and kind of calling to me. And I was like, I want to do something with this pattern in some way. But I don't sew, but I do work with stuff from the hardware store. That's what I like, I enjoy. So what I did was I took that pattern and I expanded the diamonds in that pattern to 1 foot long each, and I laser cut my poems into the diamonds. That's a heavyweight cotton paper from India, and then I sewed it. Instead of thread, I used copper wire. So those are all with copper wire and laser cut text. That's just kind of a rough thing, me working at home, putting together one of those sections. And man, I was glued to that table for hours with Netflix, just going and going. Okay, so in the end, I made 2 stars. The black one is the main one, sewn with the copper wire and the laser cut text. Those are 12 feet by 12 feet. So 12 feet high by 12 feet wide. And the poems can be read from the top point down to the tip, and you can combine any phrase to kind of make your own poem, depending on which direction you go. And I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about in a second. What was really, and there's a man looking at it. What I loved was, the highest compliment was one of my friends, her dad came in after, it was during our opening, and he came in, after a while to the back room, and he was like, did you know that if you go from the top and then you move, like you can make your own poem? And I was like, yeah, that's what I was trying to do. And so it was like, but it was really a compliment to me. The reason is, that is what I wanted. I felt like this form, the star quilt, the star, it is a form that Lakota people understand. It communicates in a certain way, okay? And so it is approachable. if I had just written poems on a flat piece of white paper and put it on a table in the gallery, who would have cared? Nobody, right? I don't think that my friend's dad would have spent, 30 minutes, an hour standing there, amazed by this, being able to make his own poem. But he was able to do that in this particular form. And so that was important to me too, thinking about form and materials and community and what speaks to a particular area and our friends, our family, and so on. That's a close-up of the colorful one. That colorful one is called Mosquitos. So I had that was not laser cut. I did stencil work. Chance spent many hours, my daughter Chance, spent many hours coloring with the oil sticks, coloring those yellow and red and so on. So she was my collaborator as well. And all of us doing, we all did the stencils. And so in that piece too, that was another kind of collaboration where I'll read one of those pieces as well. I worked with a short story written by Zitkala Shah. Do you guys know who? So Zitkala Shah is also known as Gertrude Bonin, and she was one of the first Dakota, I would say Native women writers, but she was like the first published Dakota woman writer in the late 1800s, early 1900s. She also founded NCAI, National Congress of American Indians. So she worked in many, she was just a leader in many ways. What I did was I took one of her short stories and made some found poems, okay? But what was important to me is I was looking at issues of Native identity. And I found by stripping away the particulars in this short story she wrote, the particulars, the specifics of that story, that time, that we as Native people are still using the same verbs, the same nouns. We have the same questions, the same dialogue about these issues 150 years later. So a lot of the identity issues that we have, which are very particular, any of you familiar with issues of enrollment, blood quantum, land rights, all of that, it becomes very complicated, but it's nothing new. It's very painful, but that pain is not new. Okay, we've been doing this to each other for a long time. And so that was what was important to me. And I'll read one of those pieces as well. So that's another kind of collaboration, is to go back with a writer of 2-3 generations back and work with her text and renew it in a way. Oh, here you go. Okay, so now, as I said, Mary did her work. Clementine did the interviews, and Mary did sculptures. So this is some of her sculptures. So you'll see a buffalo skull on the left, and on the right is a rock, because we consider them our relatives, believe it or not. Rocks are our relatives in a way. So she made these little sculptures, and what you do is she suspended them from the ceiling, okay? And then when you go in, you can put them on your head. Okay, and then when you put it on your head, oh, that's a porcupine she made, and she had a speaker inside the porcupine. And on the speaker was like portions of Clementine's interviews. So if you went close, that porcupine was talking about Midakuye Oyasin and explaining something to you about it. So you would see all these people putting their ear close. Inside, this was inside the rock. So inside the rock, she lined it with sweetgrass, and she put a little TV screen in there. and you can see, I think that's Jace, one of the community members, an interview. So you could put that rock on your head and you smell sweetgrass and you can watch a little interview and just get lost for an hour or whatever. And same with the buffalo skull, she lined it with sage. So you put it on, you can smell sage and watch interviews. So that was exciting. And that was us. On the left is Clementine, and then on the right is Mary. Is that all I had? That's it. Okay. Jeez. I thought I had more somehow. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to read you some of those star quilt poems. Let me see. So this is, you'll see what it looks like on the page. So at some point when I put it in a book form, this is the form it will take. And that big black star, the colorful one was mosquitoes, the black one was obligations, because mosquitoes are our relatives too, by the way, like it or not. So, but, so I'm going to share, this is one. Obligations. And again, as I said, this is based on listening to some of the interviews and some of the things that the women were saying about Midakuye Oyasin. As I hope to speak my heart, I remember to sing as a child, to understand our stories. As I hope to change my tongue, I long to sing as a child, to understand our stories. As I hope to change my eyes, I pause to sing as a mourner, to endure our stories. As I cease to believe my intuition, I forget to sing as a soldier, to endure our stories. When I gaze skyward to white glint patterns, I summon the blue woman to balance, tamped size. Like my relatives, I move freely, star-wise. When I gaze skyward to a point of absence, I synchronize with the dried willow to balance life lessons. Like my relatives, I move freely, star-wise. When I face the center to a point of absence, I slide through the chief's hand to balance life lessons. As a wanderer, star-wise, I move freely, star-wise. When I face the center of red-hot rocks, I position to the Milky Way to balance swallowed questions. As a wanderer, I move freely, star-wise. So all of those in the middle, the blue woman, the dried willow, the chief's hand, the fireplace, the Milky Way, as you might guess, those are our constellations, Lakota constellations. And so all of that has to do, again, and those, we understand, we have a relationship with the stars as well. Let's see. Oh. This is one of my favorite, just because it has to do with a larger project. I think that is interesting to me, these issues of Native identity. As I was referring to earlier, things get really complicated in our community, and they get very painful. And all of it has to do with this whole structure that we live under, right? Legislation and rights, land rights, and all of that. So what has happened a lot of times is in our own communities, it creates a sense of chaos and sometimes confusion, and there's hardship. So what I did was I went back to Zikala Shah. She has this story called The Enigma of Blue Woman. And I worked with that language, and I found that she was working a bit with the very, very, very same issues and very same language as we are today. Who am I was no longer the obsessing riddle of her life. The morning taught deep abstraction. I am a being in its center, an answer to who were your parents. Who am I was no longer the persistent question. Her inquiry prompted deep abstraction. I am Blue Star Woman in its center, an answer to who were your parents. Who am I had become the persistent question. Unwritten law required deep abstraction. A piece of earth is my birthright. Be that as it may, the government means who were your parents. Who am I had become proof of membership in the tribe. The white man's law disregarded deep abstraction. A piece of earth is my birthright. Be that as it may, oh my gosh. Be that as it may, the government means who were your parents. That's it. Okay. Oh, okay. Christina wants 2 from my book. I'm going to close with 2 poems. Does that sound good? From Whereas? What's that? Read forever. Oh. So this piece has a quote. I'm going to read from my response to the National Apology to Native Americans. And the first line in here has a quote from the actual document. So I'll do the air quotes when I start. Okay. Whereas I query my uneasiness with a statement, quote, Native peoples are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I shift in my seat, a needle in my back. Though unalienable, their rights I cannot legally claim if placed within a whereas statement. Meaning, whatever comes after the word whereas and before the semicolon in a congressional document falls short of legal grounds is never cause to sue the government. The government's courts say. Whereas I remember that abstractions such as life, liberty, and happiness rarely serve a poem. So I have learned it best not to engage these terms anyway. Yet I smash head on into this specific differentiation. The creator versus their creator. Whereas this alters my concern entirely. How do I language a collision arrived at through separation? When in doubt, I'm told, write what I know. So I peel my eye to the moment, my love of it. I wake from a dream about running. I interpret as the desire to get there. Pulling back my bed sheets, I teeter down the hall to the face of a new clock in the bathroom mirror. I say, you're old enough to look at yourself full on. Whereas I set aside interrogation to see that I cannot syntax or poem the creator, nor differentiate one creator from another creator, much less. That is mine from theirs, theirs from ours, or why a creator split. At the mirror, who can? I'm going to read a piece I haven't read in quite a while. This is near the end of the whereas pieces. Whereas, I read an article in the New York Times about the federal sequestration of funds from reservation programs, the cuts in federal promises and treaties. The article details living conditions on reservations, a suicide rate 10 times higher than the rest of the country. Therein, the story of a 12-year-old girl whose mother died. She doesn't know her father. She bounces home to foster home, weary. I regard how plainly the writer imparts her repeated sexual abuse. For mental care, unavailable services. There's a clinic that doesn't have money after May. Don't get sick after May is the important message. As I read, I cry. I always cry. And here I must be clear, my crying doesn't indicate sadness. Then I read a comment posted below the article, the online article. And this is, you can still find this article and you can still find this comment. It's, I think in the New York Times, so it's online. Just type in this comment, you'll find it. So here we go. I am a 14-year-old girl who recently visited the reservation in South Dakota with my youth group. The conditions the Native American people were living in were shocking. When I arrived home, I wrote a petition on whitehouse.gov for the U.S. to formally apologize and pay reparations to the Native American people. This petition only stays up until July 23rd, so please sign and share. You signing it would really mean a lot to a lot of people. Thank you. Dear 14-year-old girl, I want to write. The government has already formally apologized to Native American people on behalf of the plural you, your youth group, your mother and father, your best friends and their families. You, as in all American citizens. You didn't know that. I know. Yet, indeed, dear girl, the conditions on reservations have changed since the apology, meaning the apology has been followed by budget sequestration. In common terms, sequestration is removal, banishment, or exile. In law speak, it means seizure for safekeeping, but changed in federal budgeting to mean subject to cuts, best as I can understand it. Man, it's not easy to look up these terms and figure it out, but anyway. Dear girl, I went to the Indian Health Services to fix a tooth, a complicated pain. Indian health care is guaranteed by treaty, but at the clinic, limited funds don't allow treatment beyond a filling. The solution offered, pull it. Under pliers, masks, and clinical lights, a tooth that could have been saved was placed in my palm to hold after sequestration. Dear girl, I honor your response and action, I do. Yet the root of reparation is repair. My tooth will not grow back. The root gone. Here we go. And that's it, maybe.
We would normally do questions. Are you
Yeah.
open to them, or do we want to commune more informally?
We can do questions.
Maybe like
Yeah. Sure.
I keep naming
Oh,
numbers.
whatever.
Maybe 2 or 3 questions.
Yes. Please just let me come to you with the microphone.
Hey, Layli. It's great to hear you read again.
Hi, thank you.
So I was wondering, just because I've had the honor of hearing you read before a couple times, and I know you've been working on the text that became Whereas for a while before it became book. I'm wondering, what is the difference for you on work you were doing before this text, and then whatever that is, I'm not classifying it, and the text that became this book, where you entered into language or engaged with it that was not your own. Does that make sense?
Oh, wait. No, can you say it again?
Sure. I don't know if I can, but I'll try. I was wondering, work that you've written before this book, the text that became this book, whatever it was, how is the experience of engaging to enter into a book? I mean, I say this as a writer myself, where you were engaging with language that is not initially just coming from you. Does that make sense, to enter a book from that place versus to not? Which isn't to say we're not always doing that, but specifically, especially the nature and context of the language.
So you're asking about maybe the difference between drafting poems that are like the documentary type poems?
Your personal experience. I mean, I imagine no one is the same.
Versus the personal
yeah,
experience.
or it could be this book specifically, I guess. If you don't like the question, you can ignore it.
Well, no. I have to say, I was thinking about this recently. So the book is in 2 sections, and in the first section, it's called "These Being the Concerns." So a lot of those poems are about various concerns, whether it's being a parent or writing about writing, which annoys a lot of people, but there's that in there. The thing of making art, I can't help it. But anyway, so there's, even within the book, you have that contrast, because the second part is all that the address to that document. I think maybe one thing that remains the same between the two ways of writing is a particular kind of, and I talked about this last night, a fascination with language, with words. So really going from one form, one way of writing to the other, there's still a lot. I'm still me. I'm still thinking in the same way. So, I mean, even here in the first section, I have a whole piece writing about waqpanicha, which is poverty. What does that mean? What does that really mean? To be poor. Are we really poor? Because you guys know any TV show that wants to talk about native poverty, first place they go is where? Pine Ridge, right? So it was something that I wanted to think about, but I wanted to think about that idea and how we understand that. And I said this yesterday, but I wrote a whole piece about the word opaque, right? Which I thought, for years, meant see-through. And then I was just very upset to find out it means no, it means the opposite. So, what's up? Oh, do you want me to read about opaque? Do you want me to read opaque? Okay. I mean, this is the thing. I feel like the absent-minded professor sometimes. Like, how do I get through this world? I mean, it's like, oh, here's a good one. My friend was instant messaging me. I mean, come on. This is like so basic. So she goes, we're just having fun. She was like working down the hall. So we were sitting we had cubicles. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go get a mocha. And it's like dinging, and I'm like looking. And I was like, what is a mocha? And then she was like, it's coffee with chocolate in it. Haven't you ever heard of that? And then I was like, oh, mocha, like the chaos and chaos. I was saying chaos for I don't know how long, every time I read it. These strange things. But anyway, so here we go. I have always wanted opaque to mean see-through, transparent. I'm disheartened to learn it means the opposite. Why the instinct to assign a definition based on sound? Opaque. I interpret O, open, P, soft, A, airplane or directional flight, K, cut through, translating to that which is or allows air, airy, penetrating light, transparency, to say, you don't fool me for a second, you're opaque. To say, I'm partial to opaque objects, I delight in luminosity. To say, I'm interested in this painting on glass, brightly opaque. I understand the need to define as a need for stability. That I and you can be things standing understood among each other. One word can be a poem, believe it. One word can destroy a poem, dare I say I am writing to penetrate the opaque, but I confuse it too often. I negotiate instinct when a word of lightful meaning flips under, buries me in the work of blankets. So I think too, really in there is a kind of thesis, this idea that one word can be a poem, and one word can destroy a poem at the same time, you know. So yeah, I'll sit around. I wrote a whole piece because I like the word circuitous. Isn't that a beautiful word? So that's what I do for fun. So going from one form of writing to the other was, I'm still utilizing some of the same tools. Yeah, in a way. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And this will be it? Yeah. Okay. No, I'm glad you asked this because I usually end most of my readings with this piece. This is Resolution 2, and if you go online, you can view this apology online. And for the resolutions, this section, I used the actual text of that document, and then I just reworked it in my own way. So this is Resolution 2. I commend this land and this land. Honor this land. Native this land. Peoples this land. For this land. This land. Thousands this land. Of this land. Years this land. That this land. They this land. Have this land. Stewarded this land. And this land protected. This land. This land. This land. This land. This land. This land. This. Thank you.